They finally moved me into a room by myself, and for about 2 days I was in there and I was completely unable to open my eyes. SJS attacks the mucosal membranes, including the eyes, and it was very established that I needed to be kept in complete darkness, not just for the light sensitivity to my eyes, but because the fluorescent lights were putting off UV rays and it would trigger the SJS that I was already in the hospital for. I told them this, I don't know how many times. They have the medical records that show this is my 4th hospitalization with this exact same thing in the last 2 years. I reminded them of everything that they had done before. I told them the ointments and the medications that they gave me, what worked and what didn't work, what specialties needed to round on me to check the symptoms like ophthalmology and gynecology. And again, they had all of the medical records from the last 3 SJS hospitalizations. I'm not even sure which department I was taken to initially. I think I was originally taken to the ICU. But after just a few days, for some reason, they switched me from an ICU room to a regular room. And this room had a giant window. I'll never forget the look on the nurses' faces when I told them that they needed to cover that window because I was allergic to UV rays. And they looked completely shocked, like they had no idea that that was connected to me being in the hospital. I had to go through the entire process of explaining why I was hospitalized and under their care to convince them to put a sheet up over the window. I gotta breathe again. The next several days are a blur and an absolute nightmare. Like I said earlier, Stevens-Johnson syndrome doesn't start as severe as it gets. It gradually gets worse over the course of about 5 to 7 days. So by the time they had transferred me to this room with a giant window with these nurses that knew nothing about SJS, I still hadn't even hit my peak severity. By this point, I had ulcers all inside my mouth and it was difficult to speak or drink, let alone eat. The only thing that I could consume, food-wise, was like meal replacement shakes, which the hospital keeps on hand. And for 4 days, I begged them to bring me meal replacement shakes with a straw. And the only thing that they would bring me to eat was a ham and cheese sandwich. They also refused to hook me up to an IV. So while it was excruciatingly painful for me to eat or drink, I was getting no fluids, no nutrients, nothing. I asked multiple times for an IV. They had put the IV in my arm. They just didn't connect it to anything. And when I asked, they told me, the doctor says that you don't need an IV. While this was going on, the Stevens-Johnson syndrome was progressing, as it does, and the lesions all over my face were getting worse and uglier. And I knew that I had never had a lesion like this before. I knew something was wrong. At the same time, the biopsy site that they had taken about 4 or 5 days prior was not only red and burning, but it was developing this strange white discoloration and an odor. I asked multiple nurses to look at it, and some of them did, and they never did anything. After being under this hospital's care for about a week, it got to the point where when I stood up, I almost passed out because I was so dehydrated and had no fluids, and I have POTS. My blood pressure was skyrocketing every time I stood up. My urine was almost brown, and whatever was growing on my face smelled really bad. I was concerned it was MRSA. I started demanding to talk to the doctor, and they finally brought in the general doctor who was overseeing my care. I insisted that I was not being treated for Stevens-Johnson syndrome correctly and that I was developing an infection and I needed an IV and I was dehydrated and my blood pressure. I told him everything, and he insisted that I was fine because he insisted that it was not Stevens-Johnson syndrome. Every other thing that I was dealing with, clear infection, high blood pressure, brown urine, none of that mattered because I was saying it was SJS and he was saying I was wrong. So that meant that anything that came out of my mouth was wrong. I even showed him online medical journals that document sun sensitivity connection to Stevens-Johnson syndrome. While I was sitting in the hospital bed with a gross infection on my face and a blood pressure of 160 over 110. I was trying to convince this doctor to take care of me. We're not even to the worst part yet, guys. It gets worse.